Hi, is it just me? Or has being a gamer transformed into voicing how great our childhood games were? And how modern games could never top that peak? See, if this were true, I wouldn't have a problem with this. But the fact it happens after every generation kind of tells me it's not. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinions and all. But if we continue to do this, either we're gonna see the Hitler of video games emerge, or it's just gonna become a very repetitive discourse that becomes very obnoxious to hear. So, let's just get straight into nostalgia bias and its effect on gaming. Nostalgia is a powerful feeling, and it's a very human emotion. We should all feel nostalgic for our childhoods, and that extends to the games we played. What we shouldn't feel is extreme hatred for one another solely off of video game disagreements. How chronically online do you have to be to wish someone physical pain over some stupid opinions? Anyone on Twitter. But even outside of death threats, the general separation of people due to game opinions is not healthy. Who the hell cares if someone doesn't like that random 3D platformer from 1999? Who cares if someone dislikes that FPS game you would give up your firstborn child just to play for the first time again? And who cares if people don't really care about the console you grew up with? But also, liking these older things is fine as well. We just need to accept that we all have different opinions to each other. I think the only way that's gonna happen is to pull all of you back so you can look at this absurdity from a different perspective. And we can do this by looking at nostalgia bias throughout gaming history. In 1972, Pong was the first praised arcade game. But it wasn't the first game. That was Tennis for Two. But even that was only the first game for entertainment purposes. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So, Pong releases. Everyone loves it. And it basically begins the video game industry. In 1978, we got Space Invaders, Asteroids in 79, Pac-Man in 80, and so many other iconic games and future franchises. This is where the nostalgia began. As the arcade market boomed, the home console market began to creep in. Atari dominated heavily with their Atari 2600, released in 1977. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, so yeah, the video game crash of 1983 caused by sloppy remakes of popular games and generally poor quality games tanked the home console market, and to a lesser extent, the arcade market too. This ended the golden age of video games and created the first nostalgia divide. People who grew up with Pong and Galaxian say the home console Atari games can't compare to the classics of the arcade. And honestly, I agree. This is where I think this hate had less to do with nostalgia bias and more to do with objective reasoning. Travel past the video game crash, Nintendo revitalizes the home console market with their Famicom system. This allowed a new generation to explore the world of video games and now play without having to pay. I haven't seen any evidence of nostalgia bias in this era, but there very well could have been some that would be quite nonsensical. My guess as to what the previous generation would complain about is that the system was nowhere near as powerful as the arcades, and that they weren't up to the same quality as arcade games. But when the Super Famicom and Sega Mega Drive released, this is where I truly think the era of nostalgia bias began. Gamers seeing the forgiving new games said the games were too easy, and the games back in their day required way more skill to play and were far more rewarding in that area. As time went on and new consoles like the Sega Saturn, PS1 and N64 released, players would look at these new 3D games and say they were worse than the classic 2D games on the Famicom, Super Famicom, and Sega Mega Drive. The 2D games showed much more quality in their gameplay and were visually superior to their 3D counterparts. As we moved to the PS2, GameCube, Xbox, and Dreamcast era, the bias became even more evident. People disliked 3D Sonic and said it had a rough transition into 3D. People saw Mario Sunshine as a huge downgrade from Mario 64. People hated that Wind Waker was in a cartoon style and wasn't gritty and serious. And there are plenty of other specific examples for so many other franchises. But going into the PS3, Wii, and Xbox 360, the bias starts exploding. People loved the PS2 and saw the PS3 as inferior. People loved the original Xbox and saw the 360 as inferior. But gamers did not like the Wii since it tried to appeal to a casual audience. They all disliked the forced motion controls and the limited options for playing with a real controller. Even more complaints about the games being unserious were present, and overall, it seemed people did not like this era. But maybe the housing crisis soured their mood, because the PS4, Wii U, and Xbox One were apparently even worse. The PS4 started the whole PlayStation has no games argument with a lackluster launch. Except for Knack. But even the Xbox One was hated for its launch as well. But the Wii U was the most hated out of all of them. The Wii U was a completely unjustified sequel with no games and cringe advertisements that targeted kids when they should really be targeting casual audiences, like the amazing Wii did. The Wii U was a colossal failure for Nintendo, and would surely stay as the worst console when discussing console generations. But going to the PS5, Switch, and Xbox Series X, we learn that these consoles are way worse than the previous generation. The PS5 had no games, unlike the PS4, which had loads of games. Xbox was falling off since it has no franchises and no games to play. And the Switch is just a bunch of corporate slop with no charm or whimsy, unlike the Wii U. And when we look at specific games, it gets even worse. Mario now has bad games. Zelda isn't the same. Animal Crossing is a step back. New Last of Us is bad. New Halo, new Sonic, everything is now bad. But then the Switch 2 comes out, and it has no games. And all of these games are bad. Basically, everything that comes out now is garbage, and everything that came out during our childhoods was great. If you like the stuff now, you are a corporate bootlicker, and your opinions are invalid. So yeah, I think you see a problem. Now, I could just say we need to stop this constant hate and learn to love video games old and new, and for all gamers to live harmoniously with one another for the rest of time. But no, there's no fucking way that's happening in a million years. This nostalgia problem will continue to prevail in an endless cycle. And not just on video games. In all media, memes, and even political stance, will this remain a huge issue? You think this silly little video was gonna stop that? Hell no. So, why am I making this video? I'm explaining this situation, so when you see others say things like this, you can go, this guy's being dumb, let me move on with my life. The more people who do that, the less this whole thing becomes a problem, and we can start to just like things without being mind controlled. So, in conclusion, hating on new video games and new stuff in general is not new, and the arguments made are very circumstantial and do not age well as time goes by. So don't act like this, and make your own opinions on games. Or just don't listen to me. It makes no difference. I made you watch the whole video. Alright, I think that's enough. Bye.